Welcome to the Leadmore podcast. I'm your host, John T. Meyer. The Leadmore podcast is the show where I sit down with leaders of today to help inspire and grow and create more leaders for tomorrow, because I believe the world needs more leaders, and I honestly think we're on our way. The future is so bright, and I'm so excited for what it looks like. In this episode, episode 43, we sit down with the Reverend Jen Bailey, and as you'll hear when I introduce her, she's incredible. You guys are going to be blown away by listening to her. She is the founder and executive director of Faith Matters Network. Now, Faith Matters Network, if you think about all the people out there who are leading nonprofits and community activists and community organizers, they're taking care of people. They're working tirelessly day in, day out. Who's taking care of those people, right? And that's really the focus of the Faith Matters Network, to heal the healers, as they say. Now, Jen, she's incredible. She's a Truman Scholar. She's been a fellow of several different fellows. She graduated from Tufts University, the Vanderbilt Divinity School. She's been featured on CBS This Morning, New York Times, Washington Post, all these amazing things. And also, she's a new mother. Our first appearance on the show, 6-month-old Max, you'll hear him a couple times, which we love. Thought that was awesome. And Jen just has a real calming nature to her. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So take a listen to my conversation here in episode 43 with Jen Bailey. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Leadmore podcast. I'm excited for today's conversation with Jen Bailey. Jen, you are a reverend. You are founder and executive director of Faith Matters Network. I see you are a Tufts alum. You've been a fellow, a Truman Scholar. You've done a lot of incredible things. So I'm excited for today's conversation. How are you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great today.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. Tell us what Faith Matters Network is and when did you start it too?
Faith Matters Network was founded in 2014, and we are a womanist-led organization, which means that we are grounded in the wisdom, expertise, theology, and lived experience of Black women, and use that as the groundwork for our work, which is really working with faith leaders, community organizers, and activists to help them stay in the work of social change in the long haul. We believe that care is the cornerstone for any transformative social justice or social change work, in part because we know that faith leaders, organizers, activists have higher rates of burnout because they're in these helping professions and are so often the front line of dealing with primary and secondary trauma. And so our work is really centered on this concept of healing the healers and working with those who are doing the really important restorative work in our communities.
I love that. So healing the healers, and care comes in what type of ways? How do you guys define that at Faith Matters Network?
Sure. So we have 3 core values that really center our work at Faith Matters Network. Connection, recognizing that so often these leaders feel deeply isolated. So getting them in relationship to other leaders is really important to us. Second is spiritual sustainability. So we know that it's important for us to attend to not just our physical health, but also our mental and spiritual health, thinking about our holistic well-being. And the third part of our work is accompaniment, and is probably the most sacred part of our work. And so over the past several years, we've been at the forefront of helping pilot what we call a new vocation, that of the movement chaplain. So training up a whole generation of folks who are and see themselves in their primary role in social change work as accompanying others and standing with them and sitting with them during the ups and downs of their lives. And so that sacred work of accompaniment, of walking with our leaders, is probably the core of what we do.
Interesting. That's fascinating. So like the idea of, leaders need support as well. And how do we identify what that is and then provide that to them? So tell me, maybe connecting dots that aren't connected, but when you say a womanist organization, and then I think about care, speak to what is the role of a Black female in the family, and is that sort of what you mean when you say we follow that lead in terms of care?
Sure. So I have a mentor who says that Black women have never had a vision of liberation that wasn't inclusive of everybody. And that is because so often, as Malcolm X implied, right, Black women are often the most maligned people in our society. And so there's an advantage that happens when you're pushed to the margins. And when I say Black women, I'm talking about both Black cis and trans women, people who,
Sure.
so that I have a very broad definition of how we think about womanhood. But when you're at the edges, you have to get creative. And most often I use the example of the church mothers in my church growing up. So I grew up in a small town, Quincy, Illinois, which is in West Central Illinois, about 2.5 hours northwest of St. Louis. And it's really the women of my church, even though we never had a female pastor, although my denomination, the AME Church, has been ordaining women for quite a while. But it was those old ladies in the church kitchen who actually ran things, right?
Yeah, totally.
And who, through their example, I often say that I believe in the miracle of the loaves and fishes because I've seen what some Black women can do with a few boxes of spaghetti and dinner rolls. They can feed the multitudes, right? And the same thing is true in terms of the prophetic vision I saw in these women growing up. It was Sister Catherine Weldon, who passed away last month at the age of, I believe, 89, who first told me when I was 6 or 7 years old that I was going to preach someday. So
Wow.
I think part of the womanist witness and wisdom that I see is this experience, particularly of being in relationship with elder Black women who have, as we say in the church, made a way out of no way, who have been creative and had an imagination that has stretched beyond the current state of our realities into something different.
I love that. So you have this model of what sort of being in the center of care and healing can look like, and you can take this kind of persona and apply it to your work, for leaders, essentially.
Absolutely. And we also are just in debt to the work of womanist scholars, particularly in theological education. So women like Emily Towns, who's the dean of Vanderbilt Divinity School and a dear mentor of ours, folks like Phyllis Shepherd, who's also a womanist practitioner at Vanderbilt, Dolores Williams, Jacqueline Grant. There's this whole school of thought that has been at the core of this.
That's great. All right, now where should we go from here? So I want to know, you spoke about your mentor who said at 7 or 8, like, you're going to preach someday. And I'm curious, did that become then? Was that something that you
absolutely
shrug off?
not.
Okay. I didn't know if that was the goal.
Somebody who tells you that they were actively and excited about pursuing ministry or religious leadership, too enthusiastically, I always have a side eye.
You don't believe them? Okay.
Not because I don't believe them, but because I do think that we ought to take that role very seriously. Those of us who have been called to that type of spiritual leadership, in part because people are looking to you as an example, and you have the great responsibility to walk with people through the best and worst moments of their lives. And so I always say, I don't take that lightly. And if God had given me any other vision, I probably would have pursued that.
And that is a huge responsibility. Great. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And that being said, I also think one of the pivots that we're seeing emerge in the 21st century is what I would call the democratization of spiritual leadership. So it's no longer just the domain of clergy, right?
Sure.
Who are being looked to and attended to as spiritual leaders. I would argue that in the same way those women in my church, right, who never had official roles, were spiritual leaders. We see increasingly more and more people stepping into roles grounded in ritual, accompaniment, whether that be in an emerging role like the movement chaplain or other spaces. And I think that is deeply aligned with a trend we see in religious participation, particularly among millennials and Gen Zers, that more and more people are disaffiliating from traditional religious institutions.
Sure. Yeah.
Even as I would argue they haven't left spirit or God behind. and I think for some people that's hard to reconcile because so much of our imagination about what it means to be a spiritual practitioner in the U.S. has been wrapped up in our understandings of religious community as not just even of congregational life as the center of one's religious existence. And I've been excited to see the emergence of a really proliferation of new projects and a new ecosystem coming up that is starting to push the boundaries of how we think about those things in the United States.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and so that's a perfect segue to one of the questions I wanted to ask you, which was, um, when we started the show in June of 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, every episode has talked about COVID in some facet, because it's, as leaders, that's changed what we do. And so I wanted to ask you sort of this kind of broad, squishy question, but I knew you might have an answer. Is like, they say that COVID has been an accelerant. It's changed, the way education systems work. It's changed, the where we work, remote work, offices, and some of these things aren't going to go back to normal. And so I'm curious, how has faith changed because of a global pandemic, or has it?
Yeah, so that's so interesting. I'm gonna I'm a good preacher, so I'll have a three-part answer to you. I'm gonna have a three-part statement. I
Bullets, I
think,
love it.
yeah, the bullet points. I think what emerges for me as you ask that question is, first, I don't know that faith has changed so much as religious practice has changed. And what I mean by that is, depending on how you define faith, and for me, I've been really thinking about this in the context of my own religious tradition within Christianity, that one of the most popular scriptures is, right, Hebrews 11:1, that talks about faith being the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, which people often interpret as like an absence of doubt. I think that faith, an emerging understanding of faith for me is belief in the absence of certainty. And what I
Yeah,
mean by that,
inverted. Yeah,
yeah, right, that like there's so much we can't be sure of. And so what is it that we do hang our hat on? And I've returned time and time again over the past several years, but increasingly, particularly over this past year, I've returned to like old hymns that I heard growing up in the church. And there's one that begins, "Time is filled with swift transition, not on earth unmoved can stand. Build your hopes on things eternal, turn or hold to God's unchanging hand." And so for me, I think even as so much is changing about the world around us and the way that we do and practice and live faith, faith itself, I feels consistent to me, even as we have an evolving understanding of our relationship to the divine. So that's number one. Number two, I think very practically in the way that people practice their religion, so much of how we understand religious practice, particularly in the US context, is revolved around the physical space of religious buildings, right, and institutions. And so certainly that has changed in the midst of
yeah,
a pandemic. Although, I believe COVID is real, and I believe in a lot, the reality of, the over 500,000 people who've been killed in the U.S. And I say that because, unfortunately, there have been religious communities who have been
yeah,
resistant to that
yeah.
reality, and
Yep.
and so I find myself as one of those folks who very deeply asserts and believes that out of necessity, we have shifted the way that we've done religious practice, some of us.
Yeah.
Whether that means shifting to services online, or, I've gone to at least 3 Zoom funeral services and held my
Wow.
own Zoom memorial service for a dear friend who passed away in September. And so, there are ways in which I actually think we will go back to some things, right? Like even as
Yeah. Yeah.
like, I think that when it comes to marking those ceremonial moments in our lives, those ritual moments in our lives, we'll want to gather and be together. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I think the third thing I want to say is, as somebody who also is on staff at my local church, Greater Bethel AME Church here in Nashville. So I have a part of my life as a social entrepreneur and spiritual entrepreneur that exists outside the 4 walls of the church, and one that is
Sure.
deeply
I was going to ask if you still are
yeah,
preaching or not, or
I'm on staff. I still answer to my bishop, right? I have responsibilities, including the prayer line and delivering communion when
sure.
I'm able. I will be able to do that again post COVID. I've been surprised by the ways in which the pandemic unintentionally has democratized a few things, right? So, the other reality about religious life in the United States is that it's aging. And so,
Sure.
what's true about my church community is that the average age of people at my church is probably 55. It's one of the few
Okay.
intergenerational spaces I'm in. And so we have a number of people who have been sick or shut in, who have been able to participate more actively in a pandemic because we've made things more accessible to
Because
them.
yeah.
And so there's this really beautiful way in which that has been a space of grace, right, for people to enter back into community. And so I think there's a lot of different ways that we are sitting with all of those things and trends.
Yeah, that's great. That's interesting as well. Okay, so I think that's a nice shift would be to hear a little bit more about like an example or a use case of how Faith Matters works. So undoubtedly my favorite part of having a podcast is asking guests at the end, like, who's someone else that you think should be on the show? And that's how we met you, is my friend Benya Kraus. Back in December, we had her on, and she's like, you need to meet Jen. And so now we get to talk, which is just, fantastic. And so I know you guys know each other through your alma mater, but like, she would be a type of person I imagine that you guys would work with, right? Like a community builder, an activist. So give me a story of like how you guys help. How do people find you or like maybe a lot of leaders don't know that they need you, right? So how do you identify kind of who needs that care?
Yeah. So I feel like a lot of people find us through word of mouth or through a lot of our public speaking and workshops that we lead around the country when we're able to travel. But I'm trying to think of a good case study for you. I think I'll amplify the work of our movement chaplaincy program, which is called the Daring Compassion Movement Chaplaincy Project. So since we launched that project in the fall of 2019, we've trained over 500 people in the skills and capacities of what it means to be a social movement chaplain. And what I think one of the greatest results of our work is when COVID became a reality for all of us. We had just graduated our first class of social movement chaplains.
Oh, wow.
People just got their first certificate. And this was not intentional by any means on our part, but several alum of our program began to see these local movement chaplaincy groups around the country. So one was focused on COVID. It's called the Covid Grief Network, that focuses on 20 and 30 somethings who've lost a loved one to COVID-19. We have groups that have emerged in Philadelphia that in the aftermath of George Floyd's death were really sitting with and accompanying folks who are in the streets. I'm thinking in particular too of the ways in which we've offered, some of the alums of our program have become a part of a program that we launched in a response to COVID-19 called Community Care Office Hours, which were open hours that people who were activists and faith leaders could just sit with a chaplain for an hour and talk about what was going on in their lives. And we had over 200 people take us up on that over the past year. And so those are just examples of the ways in which I've seen people who've taken a kernel or seed of what we've been able to offer in the world and transform it into something even bigger and better, in my estimation. And I feel like that is really our work. We see ourselves as an emerging network of networks and as part of an ecosystem of work.
And say referrals and like, hey, you should go here, talk to this person, apply for this grant. Like, yeah, that's really great. A theme on this show has been that leaders are often pulled into leadership versus maybe sometimes I'm going to do this, I'm going for that role, this is my destiny type of thing, often getting thrusted in whether we realized we wanted it or not. And so entrepreneurship is also sometimes that way. Did you spot this need and say, we're going to build this? Or did you, again, also get pulled into what became Faith Matters Network?
Sure. I don't know that I've told this story publicly, actually. I was not convinced I was going to be a founder of anything when I graduated from seminary in 2014. I applied for a number of jobs, as you do, right, when you graduate from grad school.
Put that degree to use. Yep.
Exactly, right. And I think I had envisioned myself taking on 25, 26 at the time, an associate director role at a faith-based nonprofit that does justice-y type of work, but that I would work there for 5 to 7 years and gain additional experience and then maybe go into a deeper form of leadership afterwards. And at the last minute, I remember the thick of my last set of finals to Divinity School. Um, I saw an advertisement on a listserv for a fellowship with the Nathan Cummings Foundation, which was really thinking about a fellowship that is awarded each year to entrepreneurs who are asking big questions or trying to find a big solution to a social problem or issue in the world. And I'd worked for the time I was in divinity school almost full time doing food stamp outreach and advocacy work in the food justice realm of things, and had seen this disconnect between people exercising their faith. Really, I'll be honest, I felt like that what I was learning in seminary wasn't relevant to the people who were hungry that I was working with. And so that there wasn't really a space or network of folks who were connected to one another, who were doing more progressive policy work through the lens of their faith. All that to say is like, I was tired one night of writing papers, and I was like, let me just like type into this form this idea I have around connecting leaders in this work. Again, I applied for a number of jobs, and the fellowship was the only thing that came through. And so I like to say that like the Spirit thrust me into being an entrepreneur.
You did it by necessity, yeah.
It was not intentional by any means on my part. And I think we plan and the divine laughs. And I feel like the divine was definitely in the mix. And over time, I think we have emerged into, and I would say this to anybody who's a founder of an organization, that we have emerged into our call and purpose as we've gotten clearer about who we are. I don't think that we knew, 3-4 years ago, totally who we are.
Sure. Yeah. No worries. Shout out to Max here. Little Max is 6 months old and on our first 6-month-old on the podcast. So I think it's great. This is everybody's life these days. So totally get it. Hey, buddy.
Yeah. Max is saying hi to everybody out there.
He is working on that.
Very much excited
that
to
line,
see faces.
We plan and the divine laughs. That's really great. Let's see. What was that? Max made me think about the question I wanted to ask next. What do you find? So you work with a lot of leaders. You are a leader. I think this show has proven that leaders come with different backgrounds, different experiences, different philosophies, different styles. Do you identify? Is there some common trait amongst people that you guys work with, or that people who decide that they are going to be activists or community organizers or faith leaders? What is it is there something, or are they all different in their own way?
I would argue it's a deep sense of imagination, that they imagine that the world can be and ought be better, and are doing their best to try to make that world come. And so when people talk about visions of things like collective liberation, to me, that's an imaginative statement. It's a future-oriented statement. I would argue, a statement of faith, right? That we can see the end of white supremacy in our time, right? That we can see people get enough to eat in our time, and the communities live in a sense of deep relationship and connectivity to one another in our time. And so to me, I don't know that other folks would define it that way, but to me, like, man, if that's not a statement and declaration of radical hope that
imagination,
believe something can be different, despite the current circumstances that are before us.
Sure, absolutely. And so, and regardless of which way you go about it, or your tactics or strategies, you still have that imagination and hope. I love that. Well, I think the last topic I wanted to hit before we end with a little rapid fire is, we're going to drop this episode here in April. And so you mentioned it earlier, but we are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's death. And this idea that COVID has accelerated things, and certainly last summer was a pivotal moment in time and history in terms of social justice. Do you feel that coming up a year later, have we made progress as a country, or is there hope that we can achieve what you just described earlier and imagine a better place?
I think that, in the words of the writer Adrienne Marie Brown, things are not getting worse, they're being uncovered. We must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil. So I think George Floyd's murder and the response to it, as it were, was an inflection point. But that when we talk about racial justice issues or the challenge of embedded white supremacy in our structures and systems, that's a generational long project,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
not multi-generational project, because it took 400 years for us to get here. And there is a concept in Christian theology called Kairos Time. So these moments of time where God breaks in and we can see what I would call like a little touch of or vision of the kingdom of God right here on earth. And I think that last summer, and let me say, I'm not, never do I think that the unjustified death of someone is a kingdom moment or a moment of
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
end breaking, but I think the response showed us what is possible when people do not avert their eyes from the suffering and violence that are inflicted on the bodies of others. And so that is my long-winded way of saying, sure. And I've also seen us regress
Yeah.
in some ways. And so I do think that it will take generations to get us to the place that we need to be. And one step is still a step forward.
Yeah. And that to me kind of so perfectly illuminates your guys' work at Faith Matter Networks, because if you say this is a generational or generations type of problem to solve, or would taken us 400 years to get here, what 30-year-old leader is like, sign me up for 400 years, like, let's do it. I think there's going to be peaks and valleys, and they're going to be probably two steps forward and sometimes one step back. And so we need to care for those leaders to, get back on the horse, right? Keep going. Like, you're making progress. We're here for you. We support you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a sense of liberation in knowing that we're not going to solve every social issue by ourselves in the next 5 years, which is why I really appreciate and value the experience of being in relationship to elders who have been in this work for 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah,
Who
really ground us.
can really ground us in the long view of time. And what also is liberating about this being a long-term project and vision is that it means that my role can change over time, right? Like I don't always have to be the person, and this is not speaking for Jen, but like organizer X, I don't always have to be the person that's immediately on the front line, putting my body on the line. There will be seasons in my life where I might have to take a step back, and that is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, pass that baton.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, this has been really a great conversation. I want to end with a few questions just to kind of understand you as a leader and a person. So a few rapid fires here. You're clearly well read. So is there a book that you've read recently, or a book that you often like gift to somebody that when you think of a leader, you're like, you got to read this book?
I appreciate you saying I'm well read. What am I gonna recommend? I really like,
or did you, or let's maybe do reverends just have really good memories? Like, it seems like they're always able to quote scripture and quote poetry and quote like with like such precision that I'm always like, there's this quote out there. What was it again?
No, I'm laughing because I'm a nerd. I read like fan fiction and comic books, right?
I love it.
But I also would recommend for folks who have not read the work of science fiction author Octavia Butler, I would recommend The Parable of the Sower, which is one of the entry points into, I think, for many people, Octavia's work. She was a Black sci-fi writer, and some of the things that she is writing about around sort of a vision of a dystopian future and how hope springs eternal and change emerges, I think is really helpful. She says in that text that God is change. And I think that there's so much for us to learn from those spaces that are grounded in imagination. as much as I love history, I think I'm in a place where I want to imagine different futures. And to do
Yeah.
that, I want to be in conversation with the comic books and the sci-fi and the people who have been doing that for a long time.
Yeah. Well, and books are such a great escape for that type of stuff too. So
Yeah.
love that. So now we are at a year in this pandemic. I've been asking people, how do you unplug as a leader? You care for leaders, the care for the healers. How do you take care of yourself? What's your hobby or ritual or escape?
I'm a new mom, so I don't know that sleep feels like a ritual, but I'm appreciating more and more. My husband and I do a lot of eating good takeout and watching movies. He went to film school, and so he very much is into
Fun.
introducing me into retrospectives of directors.
Does he let you just watch it, or does he break it all down?
He lets me just watch it, and then we often have conversations afterwards. We're doing a retrospective of Korean films now, which has been really fun. And so, yeah, movies, both good movies and just entertaining stupid movies, right? He's not, even though he went to NYU Film School, he's not so highbrow in his his perspective of film that he can't have a lot of fun watching The Mandalorian or WandaVision
Sure.
and TV shows as well, right?
Perfect.
And other movies. So yeah.
Well, keep watching those movies, because I've found as the little ones get a little bit older, you're the idea of anything more than 40 minutes, you just fall asleep on the couch.
Yeah.
So, which is a perfect segue. And I know you said, I don't know, I'm still figuring this out, but I told you before, parents are leaders, I think. And you talked about those Black elder women in the church basement who, probably raise their own kids and raise other people's kids as well. And so what's a piece of parenting advice, albeit 6 months, you still have a lot to know. And Max joined us here today. So what would you share for parenting advice?
Oh, goodness. I would say I have learned that Max is as much my teacher as I am Max's teacher, even as he is just discovering his voice to prompt. Perfect prompting. And so I would say be open to be transformed as much as you are. He's been so good this whole time. But even that, right? I think he's taught me the meaning of being flexible. And as somebody who had 5 to 10 year plans, even for this podcast this morning, I had a plan around Max's care. And if we make plans and the divine laughs, I think we make plans and our babies laugh too. And so,
there it is. Max, you are a performer. I love it.
He's a performer and he's using his voice. So that would be my advice to parents. Be open to being transformed, and be open to the fact that your children, even as babies, are your teachers as well.
I think you're so right. That's such a great line. All right, we're almost done. What do you think your superpower is? Of all the things you do, what's the one thing you do best?
So I did one of those Clifton Strengths exams. About a year ago for a board I sit on, and one of the things that I was identified as is a developer, which means that I am somebody who feels really invested in the leadership of others and helping them reach their own potential.
Seems like a fit.
And so I feel maybe that's a superpower I'll name today, is my ability to be a developer and to help other people see their own genius and expertise and lean into their own and instincts as the leader, and not just lean into, but live into those things.
Yeah, I love that one. Well, that's a perfect segue to the final question, which is clearly you have been a leader and inspired and helped other leaders, but who are the leaders who have inspired you, Jen, when you think about your career to this point or your life? You've mentioned a few people but I just love to hear people talk about the leaders, whether you know them or just have studied them.
Yeah, so I would look to, and we look to in our work at Faith Matters Network, Black women who are active during the Southern Freedom Movement. So people like Ella Baker or Fannie Lou Hamer or Rosemary Freedy Harding. So people who are not on the front lines in the same way that, or as visible as a Martin Luther King, but who are doing the work. Those are folks who I like to study when it comes to social movement work and leadership.
That's great. Cool. Well, you've given me some homework too, some stuff I want to kind of read up and learn more about. So I appreciate that, and some great insights. And we got to meet Max, which was awesome and delightful. So thank you both for coming on today and taking some time with us.
Thank you so much.
It's great to meet you, Jen. Take care. Be well.
You as well.
All right. That was episode 43 with Jen Bailey. I love that conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And happy April, Leadmore listeners. April Fool's Day today, or whenever you're listening to this. Could be April, could be May. But happy April. Spring is here, and I'm really looking forward to the months ahead. So thanks for listening. Remember, we drop new episodes every Thursday here at leadmorepodcast.com or wherever you subscribe to your podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify. Go look it up, find us, like it, subscribe. And thanks again for listening. Take care and be well.